All right, everybody. So we had a little glitch there. Hopefully everybody is joined back again. Anyway, let me go ahead and go to there. So okay, so we're in the sources. That's where we were. So what's not? Oh, the camera's not on? Oh, my bad. Okay. All right, we're back. We're still getting this figured out. But hey, look at the environment. I mean, it's definitely a step up. We got the whole LED light situation going on. We have the couch. The lighting is very moody, I would say. So, we're making strides to get this into a world-class production, I would say. So we're going to go ahead and one thing I have to say, though, is that we are really missing the sounds that we had in previous broadcasts, and we're going to get those back. It's just that we're in this different room, and getting the audio in here, it's, a little bit challenging, but we're going to bring those back. We've been getting thousands of Twitter messages about it. Okay. Just kidding. No, all right. We're going to go ahead and continue on here. So we got an event back here, and we have the data, then we have the method. The method came from this. So this is what actually springs the pop-up window. So it says window.open, and then it brings up YadaCoin.io identity. And you could replace this with localhost port 8000 or whatever port you have. So this is just basically saying, I want to open that identity widget for getting the identity. And don't worry too much about the origin for now. We're going to look into that later. So event data method equals identity. So we're going to step into there. We're going to close the pop-up. You see that tab just close. We have the identity 1. It's not defined yet. So we're taking this as the first identity. So, boom. Identity 1 is now selected. So we're going to select the second identity. Now we haven't defined a second identity in the identity management widget. See, we just have identity 1, so we're going to create another one. Identity 2. And these identities are saved locally on your browser. They're not saved on the back end at YadaCoin.io or anything like that. Just for your information. Okay. So we're going to create that identity and save it here. And select it, and that's going to hit that breakpoint again. And because identity 1 is already defined, we're going to drop into this else if area, and we are going to define identity 2. So boom, there we go. So we have both identities selected now. All right, so let's continue on. Now we need to have these identities send requests to one another. So at this point, we are still in tutorial 1, basically, kind of crossing over into tutorial 2, but this is more tutorial 1 stuff where you're just selecting the identities and bringing them into the application. So now we're getting into actual tutorial number 2 area. And I'll have these parts of the code lined off with comments saying this is, necessary for this tutorial, but it is part of tutorial 1, and I'll show you where the new code for the new tutorial is. So it'll say this is starting tutorial 2 in the code. And you'll see all of this in the GitHub tutorials area, and I'll give you a link in the description again for that. So we're going to define a function for adding a contact, but let's add the button first for adding the contact. Okay, so we have step 1 and step 2, so now we have step 3. Identity 1 requests identity 2. And this button is going to say request contact, and it's going to call the add contact function. So let's define the add contact function. So here's the add contact function. We're going to, again, open the window. Nothing different there. The method is going to be add contact, same origin. This time we're going to define a message. So the message is going to define the contact that we want to add, and then the identity that we want to use to request that contact. So this actually helps so that you don't have to reselect the identity once the pop-up window opens. It tells the pop-up window which identity you want to use. So, there's no confusion. The window opens and, you don't know which identity, or you forget, or, whatever. Just any sort of like user interface, user experience stuff that could come up there. So we just kind of handle that issue right up front by telling it which identity we want to use. So let's go ahead and run that function. Easy. Easy in the kitchen. Easy in the kitchen. All right, so let's go ahead and we have to refresh and get that code, and then I have to select those identities over again. All right, so now we're going to watch the network activity when we request a contact, because this is probably going to happen pretty quickly. Oh, yes. One thing that we do need to do is handle when it comes back. So we have it handling the identity method when it comes back from the post, when the pop-up window does a post message to its parent. But we don't have one for the add contact, so let's go ahead and do that. So we just want to say close the window, but this is like your hook when it's finished. So we could do a lot of different things in this area after it's added and it comes back. So pop-up window closed. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, I'm getting trolled over here. Okay, so we're going to select that. Oh, I didn't refresh. My bad. Okay, so that's what would happen if we didn't have that. It would just remain open. All right, so I'm going to select the identity again. And now we're going to say identity 1 requests identity 2. Boom. And that did that. So, and the cool thing about the widget is that it handles all of the transaction creation. It handles all of the cryptography. It does all of that stuff that you don't need or will want to mess with. It takes care of all of the protocol intricacies and everything. So yeah, so that's really great. That's one thing that I really love about this new identity widget. I really think it's the next stage of our roadmap. So we have the request in the blockchain. Identity 1 has now requested identity 2. That transaction has been created, it's been broadcast to the network, and it's now on its way into the blockchain. But on this particular node, we can use that request. We can already start using it. We can already start we can already use it to accept the request. Identity 2 can already see that as a request in their identity. So let's go ahead and do that. So that concludes tutorial 2. So we're done with tutorial 2 now. We've requested a user, and you know, one thing I should do is probably list that request. Yeah, let's do that real quick. Let's add that. So we want to show the request. And I'm actually going to update the tutorial to show the request, because that just makes sense. Okay, so we're going to add a step 4 here, and this is still in tutorial 2. So I take that back. We're still in tutorial 2. So get contact request from identity 1 to identity 2. So we're going to get that request. So we're going to fire off get graph 1. So get graph for identity 2. So let's get the contact request for identity 2, and then we're going to populate contacts 1 there with the contact request for identity 2 from identity 1. Okay, so let's define that function of get graph 2 or get graph 1. And again, we're going to open a window with the identity, same stuff, but now we're just going to get graph. So the method is get graph, and then we are going to send the message saying which identity we want to get the graph for, and that's going to be identity 2. So we're saying give me the identity, give me the graph for this identity, and we're specifying identity 2. And then we're going to, again, put the handler up here for get graph. So we had add contact. Now we're going to add get graph up there. Okay. So here we are. We have, this is saying if the contacts of the graph is populated, that means the relationship is finished. Both sides have requested and accepted. Okay, so now we have friend requests over here. So since contacts won't be populated when it's just a request from one side of the relationship, we're going to grab the friend request. So I just did this just to make things simpler. So we're going to go ahead and do another branch here saying if contacts 1 list item is, if there are no list items, then we must be talking about contacts 1. And that will again be populated here. Okay, so then we just take the ID that was specified there, and we're going to use that to get the element, and then we're going to create a list item, and then we're going to insert the contact request that came through. All right, so let's go ahead and refresh the page, and I'm going to run through this again. So we're selecting the first identity, and then we're selecting the second identity. And we already requested the contact, so we don't need to do that. And then we're going to get the contact request. and we found it. So the contact request was from identity 1. Okay, so when your application has a user on it, you'll be able to get their friend requests or their contact requests inside of your application. So this is how you're going to start to be able to build your user base, and they'll be able to bring on their friends, and they'll be able to add their friends, and their friends will be able to see their friendship requests. And now if this is a business, you're going to be able to add your contacts, add your coworkers, your associates from inside and outside your organization. And this is really powerful because this is all protected by public key cryptography. So you're going to be able to verify the identities of everybody involved, inside and outside of your organization. It's incredibly powerful. So let's move on. This is the conclusion of tutorial 2. So now I'm getting into tutorial 3 code. So surprisingly, this is basically going to mimic the tutorial 2. All we're doing is really just creating another contact request, but because there's already a request from identity 1, it's just going to count that as accepting the request from identity 1. So again, identity 2 is essentially going to be creating a contact request for identity 1. Identity 2 is going to be creating a contact request for identity 1. But because identity 1 has already created a contact request for identity 2, that will count as a completed relationship, a complete friendship. So your application will be able to use that relationship to do interactions between those users, whether that be sending messages or mail or calendar invites or things for games. They'll have that encrypted communication channel. They'll be able to start establishing encrypted or encryption keys between them to send messages, private messages, and all sorts of things like that. So we've added a step 5. Identity 2 accepts the contact request from identity 1. And we've added a button for that, accept contact, and then we have to still define add contact to. So let's go ahead and define add contact to. And again, you'll find that a lot of this is repeating these patterns. You know, adding contacts, getting the graphs, getting the identities. So after you get, you know, those 3 core concepts, then, you know, you're just kind of repeating them. So I think it makes it a lot easier to understand that way. So let's go ahead and we're gonna accept that contact, and that's step 5, and let's go ahead and handle that. And we already have that, actually. So we already have that handling the add contact. All that does is close the window. So we've already done that. So let's just kind of move ahead, and we'll do the accept contact and get contacts for identity identity 1 all in one pop. So let's go ahead and add that, step 6. So show contact, or show the accepted request from identity 2. So basically we're going to like confirm to identity 1 that identity 2 accepted their request. Okay, and then we're going to populate that relationship there in this list element here. Okay, so again, we need to do a get graph function definition to show that friend acceptance. So there we go, and again it's just another get graph, and we're this time we're saying we want to get the graph for identity 1. So get graph, the reason why we're defining another function here is because the identity. We could do, we could do one function where, it branches logically between identity 1 and identity 2, but this is the only difference between these two functions, is that we're getting the graph for identity 2, and then in this function we're getting the graph for identity 1. And the reason why we're getting the reason why we're getting the graph for identity 1 in this function is to get the confirmation, the contact acceptance confirmation. So that will just show that identity 2 did in fact accept the request. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to go here, I'm going to refresh, go through this again. So identity 1, identity 2, and we've already requested the contact in tutorial 2, and we've already shown that that contact was requested, and that's the contact request right there. And so now we're going to accept that contact request. So we're going to fire that add contact, and that's going to create the request or the confirmation on the blockchain and in the network. It's going to generate that transaction, and then all we have to do from there, and that's available instantly. So now we can say get the contacts for identity 1. So identity 1 will now show that the contact request was accepted. So boom, and then that window will close, and then now we see that identity 2 is in their contacts list. So if identity 2 had not accepted the contact request, then that would not return any values. That would not return that identity 2 value. But because they did accept the request, and there is a transaction in the network, at this point it's in the mempool, we do see that in the list of contacts. So we are good to go on tutorial number 3. One second, everybody. That's tutorial number 3. We're going to take a short break real quick, and I'm getting a word from my producer, and I think I need to answer some questions real quick. So I'll be right back. Go ahead and transition out of here. All right, everybody. So that was the YadaCoin tutorial. We covered tutorials 2 and tutorial 3. I know that's probably kind of a lot, but I promise you, in retrospect, it really won't seem like that much. And that's really the gist of the entire life cycle of creating identities, selecting identities, bringing them into your application, creating friend requests, creating contact requests, creating or accepting those contact requests, and then using those relationships, which we're going to cover the interactions between users in further tutorials. But as far as establishing that foundation and having those relationships available for use in your application, showing friendships, expanding that that user base and that social graph, we just covered it. So the hard part's over as far as that's concerned. So thank you for watching. Really appreciate it. And let me know any questions or anything you'd like to see. I'd be happy to answer. And we'll do this again next week. I'll see you there.